الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. As always, we begin with the praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We begin by asking Allah Azza wa Jal to exalt the mention and grant peace to our Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and to his family and his companions and all those who follow his way until the last day. What we have this evening, and as usual my evenings in Newcastle are, subhanallah, very few in number. And bi'idhnillahi ta'ala there will be more inshallah in the future, but it always seems when I come to Newcastle I come for a day here and a day there. But wallah, the brothers asked if it was possible for us to, I'm not sure it's teaching a class, it's more like if I could share with you some of the things that I heard from our mashayikh. Because in reality that's what my role is, you know. It's not like I'm here like to bring you this immense amount of knowledge that I gathered. It's more like I'm here to transmit to you or to share with you some of the beautiful things that I heard on my travels with some of our scholars and our ulama, and to just summarize them for you and bring them into English. And there is a book that I have been translating of late, and wallahi this book I have not enjoyed translating a book so much for a very long time. It was a difficult book to translate, and a book that I think it took me a lot longer than I thought it would. But wallahi, it was a book that when I read it, the more I wanted to just read it over and over and over again. And this book was written really to answer a question. Or it was written almost like an instruction manual. It's a very summarized book. It's not one of the very, very old books, or it's not a book that comes in many, many volumes. In English, I think it came to 33 pages. It's not a very long book. But it's a book about seeking knowledge. And many books have been written on the topic of seeking knowledge throughout history. Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi, Hada al-Faqih wal-Mutafaqih. There are many, many books throughout history. Ibn Jama'i has Tadhkirat al-Sami'. There are many, many books. Rahimullahu jami'a. Allah have mercy on the authors. Big books, little books, tall books. And from the books which has gained traction in recent times is definitely the book of Sheikh Bakr Abu Zayd rahimahullah ta'ala, Hilyatul Talib al-Ilm, the adornment of the student of knowledge, etiquettes of seeking knowledge. Very beautiful book. But I found that this book, in summary, had something that I've never seen in other books. First of all, the Sheikh who wrote it, he gathered together all of that information in those books, and he didn't put everything down, but he really summarized it and ordered it in a really beautiful way. And it's very summarized and relatively easy to understand as well. So this book is really a book that answers the question, how should I seek knowledge? Or, I'm seeking knowledge, why am I not achieving? Or, why did such and such a scholar achieve so much in the knowledge that they dedicate themselves to, and why is it that others achieve less? All of these questions are answered by this book. And this book is a book which is called Ta'zeemul Ilm, revering knowledge, putting knowledge up there, having huge respect for knowledge. It's called Ta'zeemul Ilm, and it's by our Sheikh Salih bin Abdullah bin Hamad al-Usaymi, Hafidhahullah ta'ala. And the Sheikh, he teaches this book every year in Medina as part of his program that he calls Muhimmatul Ilm. And inshallah ta'ala, I'd love to teach this book in full, but obviously we're not going to get through 33 pages tonight like that. So what I decided to do is just to summarize, give you like a taster of it, and to summarize for you some of the things the Sheikh said, so that we can really take these on board and we can really start to revere knowledge, really start to put knowledge on a big, have a big status in our eyes. And if we do that, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, we see the fruits of that revering knowledge, inshaAllah ta'ala, as we proceed. So the Shaykh begins by just a little introduction, and I just want to quote some parts of it. He says that knowledge is a great legacy in which people of nobility follow one another generation after generation. Generation after generation. And you know, time after time, there are these people who dedicate their lives to seeking knowledge. The most noble people in our ummah, they're the people who have dedicated the most time and the most of their effort and the most of their, you know, their wealth and everything that they could in order to gain knowledge. And the Shaykh, he said, for those who seek out things of high value, there is no other concern but this. And there is no desire for any other goal besides this. How could it not be when the happiness of both worlds and the good of both lives are achieved from getting knowledge? It's like he's saying that people who want things of high value, they don't collect cars and they don't collect, you know, stamps and they don't collect rare manuscripts. The people who want things of really high value, they collect knowledge. He said it's the honor of everything that exists and the light of every peak and valley. It's the adornment of the greats and the pleasure of those who behold it. Whoever goes towards it is blessed. Whoever carries knowledge around with them has gained a great prize. And whoever acts according to knowledge will be safe. The Shaykh, he said, if it was a product that was sold, huge amounts of money would be spent on it. And if it was high up in the sky, the people would do anything in order to reach it. Out of every marketplace, it has the most profit. And out of every source of pride, it's the most honorable. When someone's achieved something in knowledge, it's the most noble achievement you can achieve. And its resources are the most praiseworthy of resources. The one who's going to get eternal happiness is the one who pushes themselves to seek it and encourages their soul to journey towards it. And the wretched one is the one who turns away from it, or he makes others do so, or he distances himself from it and he makes others do so. And he said, the Shaykh, he said a really profound thing. He said, this person who doesn't want knowledge, it's like his nose is blocked from the fragrance of knowledge, and it's like his neck is sealed. He said, وَخَتْمُ الْقَفَى هَذَا عَبْدٌ مَحْرُومٌ. He said, it's like the person has a seal on their neck saying this is a person who has been prevented from anything good. Mahroom. He's bereft. Everything good from him has gone. He's been prevented from everything good. If he didn't get knowledge, it's like he was sealed and stamped on him saying, هَذَا عَبْدٌ مَحْرُومٌ. This is a person who he's been prohibited, he's been prevented, and he's bereft of any good. And that's why the poet, he said, and I'll just quote the poetry in English, maybe if we do it in Arabic it's going to take a long time. He said, knowledge enters the heart of every successful one without any doorman or seeking permission. And the person who is mahroom, this person repels it due to his failure. Oh Allah, don't make us wretched by prohibiting us from it. So the Shaykh, he wrote this book to establish a principle. And this principle is the first thing I want to talk to you guys about this evening. And it's the first thing I want to summarize from the Shaykh's book. And really, this principle is really, really important. And this principle, the Shaykh, he mentions, he said, فَإِنَّ حَظَّ الْعَبْدِ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ مَوْقُوفٌ عَلَى حَظِّ قَلْبِهِ مِنْ تَعْظِيمِهِ وَإِجْلَالِهِ. This is the principle the Shaykh mentions. He said, the amount of knowledge that a person gains is totally dependent upon the amount that his heart reveres and honors knowledge. And this is the purpose to which the Shaykh wrote the book. This is the principle that he brought. The whole thing that he wrote in the book is all about this. That the amount of knowledge you gain depends on how much you honor knowledge, you revere knowledge, how much you have respect for knowledge, and how much you dedicate yourself to knowledge. That is how much knowledge you're going to get. And that is the answer to why every one of us is where we are in knowledge today. And that's the answer when someone said, how did Shaykh so-and-so reach so much knowledge? And how did I not reach so much knowledge? The Shaykh spent so many years studying, I spent so many years studying. Why is it that he is there and why is it that I am here? This is the answer. And there is no other answer except this. فَإِنَّ حَظَّ الْعَبْدِ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ مَوْقُوفٌ عَلَى حَظِّ قَلْبِهِ مِنْ تَعْظِيمِهِ وَإِجْلَالِهِ. The more you honor knowledge, that is how much knowledge you're going to get. The extent to which you honor, the extent to which you revere, the extent to which you respect, the extent to which you dedicate yourself to knowledge, that is exactly how much knowledge you're going to get. And that is why every one of us is where they are, And that is how we can be better and how we can go to a level that we couldn't have imagined that we could go to. It's all about how much you respect and honor and revere and dedicate yourself to knowledge. And what the Shaykh then did is he mentioned 20 ways in which you can honor knowledge. 20 ways in which you can make knowledge something huge status and honored and revered, and some way that you can really show knowledge what it's due. 20 ways. But before that, he answered a doubt that maybe some people might have, or a confusion some people might fall into. And he said that some people, they might say, and he calls it the speech of laziness, and he calls it the speech of laziness and dawdling. Is that some people, they may say, هذه أحوال من مضى من سلف الأمة وخير الورى فأين الثرى من الثريا. They say, these are the people of old. You're talking about Imam Ahmad. You're talking about these big scholars of Islam. You're a grain of sand. They're up in the stars. How is the sand going to compare to the stars? فأين الثرى من الثريا. How the sand, the grain of sand of the earth, how is that going to compare to the stars? You people are like trying to copy somebody who's so far above you, you can never ever copy them. You can never honor knowledge the way they honored it, so why you even try? The Shaykh, he calls this, as I said, he calls it khutbatul kasali wat tawani, the speech of laziness and dawdling. He said, and he answered with a beautiful line of poetry. And the poet, he said, فَتَشَبَّهُوا إِن لَمْ تَكُونُوا مِثْلَهُمْ إِنَّ التَّشَبُّهَ بِالْكِرَامِ فَلَاحٌ. He said, resemble them even if you're not like them. Because resembling a noble person is success in of itself. It doesn't matter if you're saying that I can never reach that level, I can never be like those people, but even resembling them is going to make you something amazing. Even if you just copy some of how those people used to be, you're going to be something amazing, even if you couldn't copy all of it. So like the poet said, even resembling someone noble is success. So how about the one who even achieves even a percentage of that? Wallah, this person can achieve a great deal of good. So don't let a person say to you that you're here in Newcastle and you're right down here on the floor and you're trying to be like somebody up there in the stars and you're trying to copy all of these great people that came before. Don't let people say that to you. Because at the end of the day, even resembling somebody who is that noble is a big act of success. It's a big success for you, let alone achieving some of what they achieved. So the Shaykh's going to mention 20 principles, and I'm just going to mention the principle and 1 or 2 points relating to it. I'm not going to quote you what the Shaykh said. The first principle, he said, before you begin anything else, you have to purify the container that knowledge is kept in. So knowledge is kept in a container. You know, like you keep your food in a container, you keep your drink in a container, everything has its vessel or its container, its wi'a. It's like the place where you put it. And the place where you put knowledge is the heart. And if that heart is unclean and it's not ready for knowledge and it's muddied and spoilt, then that knowledge is not going to go inside of it. And the Shaykh, he gave the example of a lamp. He said it's like a lamp. If the glass of the lamp is dirty, you're never going to see the light from that lamp. No matter how much knowledge you get, you might get a lot of information, a lot of ma'lumat, a lot of information. But because that heart is dirty, it's not clean, that knowledge is never ever going to spread out from that heart. Instead, it's always going to be like a lamp that's covered in mud. There's a lot of light inside, but that light it's not spreading out. And the Shaykh, he mentioned there are 2 things you have to purify your heart from. He said you have to purify it from shahawat, you have to purify it from shubuhat, you have to purify it from your desires. Where you know something is wrong, but you do it anyway. And you have to purify it from doubts and confusion, and where you get misconceptions and you get mixed up. And you think something is right when in fact it is wrong. And through knowledge and action, you purify this heart and you get it clean. And the cleaner your heart is and the purer your heart is, the more knowledge you're going to be able to put into it. And the weaker your heart is and the more dirty it is, the less knowledge is going to go into it. And he gave an evidence for this. He gave an evidence of the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ, purify your garments. And he mentioned the tafsir of the scholars who said that your garments here, thiyabak, in this ayah, is your heart, meaning your inner self, your batin, your inner self. And he mentioned many other narrations, but we're just going to pick out points. The second thing the Shaykh said is to purify your intention. So now your heart is ready. You've got rid of some shahawat, shubuhat, confusion, doubts. You started to clean your heart, and you're not going to get it. It's never going to be perfect. But you started to clean your heart, and you find your heart is taking on board more knowledge because of the cleanliness and the purity of it. But one of the things you have to be very careful about is the intention. And the Shaykh said a person only achieves knowledge to the extent of his sincerity. And he mentioned 4 things that are sincerity in knowledge. If you want to say what does it mean to be sincere in knowledge? What's my intention? You know, like when people say when I start my salah, what should my intention be? What's my niyyah for this? The Shaykh said 4 things. Number 1, to remove ignorance from yourself. Number 2, to remove ignorance from other people. Number 3, to bring knowledge to life. You know, the knowledge that died and people forgot about. Like a sunnah, how many times we see people, maybe they forgot about a certain sunnah. A small sunnah maybe. But they forgot about that sunnah became lost. In not everywhere in the world, because the sunnah doesn't die everywhere, but it died in a particular city or in a particular place, and you brought it back to life. What we call ihya al-sunnah, you brought it back to life. Or ihya al-ilm, you brought knowledge back to life, and people started to practice that sunnah. And the 4th thing is to act upon it. He said, if your intention is these 4 things, that when I'm learning so that I can be less ignorant, and so I can teach other people to be less ignorant, and so I can bring the sunnah to life, or the knowledge to life, and I can put it into practice, then this is the person who has gathered together the perfect intention for seeking knowledge. But in this you have to remember and be careful of the statement of Sufyan al-Thawri rahimahullah ta'ala, ما عالجت شيئا أشد علي من نيتي لأنها تتقلب علي. I never struggled with anything harder for me than correcting my intention, because it turns upon me. And Sulaiman al-Hashimi rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, perhaps I would narrate a single hadith with an intention, and when I came to a certain part of it, my intention would change. So a single hadith requires many intentions. How amazing is that? You just one topic. I'm just talking to you about principle number 2. And principle number 2 doesn't require one intention from me. It requires me to constantly renew my intention. The 3rd principle, focusing all of your attention on seeking knowledge. So we said, if your heart's not pure, knowledge is not going to go in. If your intention is not right, knowledge is not going to go in. Or if it's, like if there are problems with it, even if they are small problems, it's going to block some knowledge from going in. The 3rd thing is focusing all of your attention on it. And this is really important because, to be honest, a lot of us, knowledge for us is really a part-time thing. Really it is like I give it an hour a week, I come to a class. If you come to a class for an hour a week, mashallah, may Allah bless you, it's beautiful. But realize that's the knowledge you're going to get. If you come for an hour a week, you're going to get an hour a week's worth of knowledge. And if you make knowledge your preoccupation every day and every night, as much as you possibly can, so that your mind is always thinking about it and nothing else, you're going to get that amount of knowledge. And that's why you see some people who are so dedicated to learning and studying, and they read so many books every day, and they study with so many teachers every day, and some of them might have 15 lessons a day, and some of them might have had, some of the early generations had 50 lessons a day. 50 lessons a day. Imagine all of that work. For sure, when someone puts that work in, they're going to get something back from it. And when someone puts in an hour a week or an hour a month, or they come to 2 conferences a year, they're going to get that back. So according to what you put in and how keen you are and how focused you are, that's what you're going to get. And the Shaykh said you need 3 things to do this. Number 1, you need to be keen. You need to be haris. You need to be keen, and you need to be dedicated to get what benefits. So you're so keen and your eyes are open and your ears to the ground looking for any opportunity to get knowledge. The second thing is you seek the help of Allah Azza wa Jal. Al-isti'anatu billah. You ask Allah for His help. You seek His help. And the third thing is that you don't have al-ajz. You don't be helpless and impotent where you say, I can't do this. I'm not going to achieve this. There's no point. What knowledge am I going to get here in Newcastle? How am I going to do it? If I can't go to this place and study, I'm not going to learn anything. If you can bring these three things, you're keen and you're dedicated and you ask Allah for His help and you don't feel helpless, then you're going to have that dedication. It's going to bring you a great deal of knowledge in return. And that's why Al-Junayd rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, nobody seeks something with dedication and truthfulness except that he will achieve it. Even if he doesn't achieve all of it, he will achieve some of it. And the poet, he said, achievement comes from hard work and failure comes from laziness. Exert yourself and you will soon achieve the goal of your dreams. The fourth principle, the Shaykh said, when you're focusing your attention and you're becoming that dedicated person, you're asking for Allah's help and all of your energy and your focus and your time is being spent on it, make sure that your focus is upon the Quran and the Sunnah. And he said how wonderful is the statement of Iyad al-Yahsubi or al-Yahsubi in his book Al-Ilma', in which he said, knowledge is found in two sources. None transgresses them except the one misguided from the clear road. Knowledge of the book and knowledge of the narrations which are attributed from a follower, from a companion. There's two types of knowledge that really matter. Yes, there are a lot of supporting knowledge, a lot of beneficial knowledge, a lot of knowledge in the dunya that's useful. But there are two pieces of knowledge that these are what really matters. The Quran and the Sunnah. And that is why Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he said in his book Al-Fawaid, seeking knowledge of the book and the Sunnah and understanding it the way Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam intended, and the knowledge of the limits which have been sent down. This is what really matters. And a person might say, well, what about all the knowledge today and all the different sciences and all the different fields and branches of knowledge today? Hammad ibn Zayd rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, I asked Ayyub al-Sakhtiyani rahimahullah ta'ala, is knowledge today more or was it more in the past? He said speech today is more and knowledge was more in the past. And that was Ayyub al-Sakhtiyani. So how about today? He said, as for the past, the Sahaba, they had more knowledge and less speech. And as for the people today, they have more speech and less knowledge. That's why someone might say, why is it there after the Sahaba, there are books of tafsir that are like 50 volumes. Now, the Sahaba knew everything they needed to know about the Quran. But the reality is they spoke a relatively small amount and they knew a huge amount. Whereas the people later on, they spoke a large amount, but the knowledge within that was less than what those Sahaba radiallahu anhum gained. The fifth principle, taking the proper path which would lead to it. There's a proper path. So for example, if I were to say to you, I want you to drive from Newcastle to Leeds, but I didn't tell you the way and you got lost along the way. I'm not saying you'll never get to Leeds, you might get there in the end, but you drove 6 hours and you used up 3 tanks of petrol and you went up and around and north and south and you kept coming back on yourself again and again. How are you going to feel? I feel like, alhamdulillah, I got there, but yeah, it wasn't the most efficient way of getting there, right? I could have got there, and if I had the chance again, I can get there much quicker. So knowledge is like that. There's a path that will lead you very quickly to a lot of knowledge, and there's a path that takes you around the mountains and the houses and the trees and all the way around the back, and maybe eventually you'll get something, but you'll take a lot of effort for very little work. And the Shaykh, he mentioned a really beautiful line of poetry, which really kind of summarizes, I think, for us exactly what we need when it comes to seeking knowledge. And he mentioned this from Muhammad Murtada ibn Muhammad al-Zabidi, the author of Taj al-Urus, who has a poem called Alfiyat al-Sanad. And in this poem, He said, فَمَا حَوَى الْغَايَةَ فِي أَلْفِ سَنَةٍ شخص فخذ من كل فن أحسنه بحفظ متن جامع للراجح تأخذه على مفيد ناصح. He said the end of seeking knowledge cannot be attained in 1,000 years by a person. So take from every science the best of it. By memorizing a text which gathers together that which is superior, taking it from one who benefits and sincerely advises. It's really beautiful. He basically mentioned this whole road. He described for you the road in just 2 lines of poetry. He said, you can't gain all the knowledge that exists in this world in 1,000 years. Even Islamic knowledge. If you were to read every book that's ever been written on Islamic knowledge, in 1,000 years you wouldn't finish. So what can you do? You need to go to each individual science from all the sciences of Islam. So for example, tafsir is a science, hadith is a science, the science of hadith, like the narrators and the authentic, that's a science. And fiqh is a science. And the science, the usul al-fiqh, the principles of fiqh is a science. And Arabic grammar and nahu is a science. And sarf is a science, morphology, and all of these different sciences of Islam. You go to each science and you take the best of each one. Now he indicated a couple of things. First of all, he indicated you can't just take some of them and leave others. You need to take from each of them. What did the poet say? فَخُذْ مِنْ كُلِّ فَنٍ مِنْ كُلِّ فَنٍ. From every single science, أحسن, the best bit of it, the best part of it. Then he explained to you what the best part is. He said, بِحِفْظ, by memorizing. And this is important. He didn't say by reading, by memorizing a text which is superior. It gathers the things which are superior. So what is a text which is superior? What does that mean? In each of these sciences, there are texts that throughout the years, these have become world famous. And everyone, all of the scholars everywhere teach these particular books. So for example, if we were to take any science, we could take any science we wanted to. We could take any science we wanted to. We could go into Arabic grammar. We could say in Arabic grammar, not everywhere, people have some differences in the books. But generally, as a rule, the first thing you're going to see people teaching people in Arabic grammar is Al-Ajrumiyyah. And then they're going to teach Mutammimat Al-Ajrumiyyah, for example. And then they're going to teach Qatrul Nada. And then they're going to teach Alfiyat ibn Malik. Generally, in vast majority of places, you're going to find people teaching these books. There are others. And each country has its preferred, or each region has its preferred books. But the point is, there are certain books. You don't need to go through every book that's ever been written on Arabic grammar. In fact, a friend said to me, and I think it's a beautiful statement, he said, Arabic grammar is like salt. Too much of it, in nahu, it's like salt. Too much of it spoils the food, and too little of it spoils the food. And you need enough of it to be able to understand the Quran and the Sunnah and so on. But in each science, there's a pathway. There's books that you can study. You don't go off for the rare and the weird and the ones that you've never heard anybody teach before. I found this rare manuscript that nobody knows about, or my teacher is teaching me this book that I've never seen before. But you go and you take those books which are rajih. And the Shaykh himself, he explained what the meaning of rajih is. He said rajih means they are al-mu'tamad. They're the ones that are depended upon in the science. That if you were to go to the scholar of Nahu and say, Shaykh, what book should I do? 99% of them are going to give you the same 3 books or 4 books. That doesn't mean it's the end of the science. There's a lot more after that. But these are what's going to get you firm in each science. In tafsir, if you went to them, the scholar of tafsir is not going to take you too far away from a set number of 1, 2, 3 books that he's going to tell you to study, or 4 books. Likewise, in hadith, most people are going to say what? Start with the 40 hadith of Imam al-Nawawi. If you want to, you could go to Riyadh al-Salihin, or you could go directly to, for example, Umdatul Ahkam, or if you feel like you have more energy, Bulugh al-Maram. And then after that, maybe you can do Al-Lu'lu' wal-Marjan, the Bukhari and Muslim was joined, and then you're going to do Bukhari and Muslim and the 4 Sunnah. Almost every scholar of hadith is going to tell you the same. They might miss a book here, add a book here, but generally, they're going to tell you the same set of books. Many of the early ones you're going to memorize according to your ability. I'm not going to say you're going to memorize the Kutub al-Sittah. A depending on if you have the ability to do that. But at least you're going to memorize at least you're going to memorize Umdatul Ahkam or Bulugh al-Maram. And then after that, what you can do. So each person is doing that, but that's not the end of it. The second part is تأخذه على مفيد ناصح. You take it from someone who is mufid and nasih. What does this mean? First of all, it means you take these texts from a scholar. These texts are not read me yourself texts. They're very simple, but because you're in the beginning stage, you take them from a sheikh. Now your sheikh maybe, you have availability in Newcastle, mashallah, we have brothers who are very knowledgeable, who can teach you some of these books. They have ijazat in some of these books. But maybe you won't find someone who can teach you all of them yet. Maybe over time you progress and you keep going, but you take each one of these basic books from a teacher. And that teacher has to have two qualities. He has to be mufid and he has to be nasih. What do these two qualities mean? Mufid means that he's qualified. He benefits you. You're not going to benefit from someone who doesn't know what the book means themselves. So when they're explaining the book to you, they themselves don't understand what the book is, and so they're going to confuse you. Somebody who's got to benefit you by being qualified. And the second thing is that he has to be a person who is suitable as an example to be followed and knows how to teach. Because not every person of knowledge knows how to teach, right? You could get a person of knowledge who knows the book very, very well, but he doesn't really understand how to convey that to a student or how to bring that to a student. So maybe he would give you complicated issues before he gives you simple issues. That's why sometimes we sit down and, you know, a lot of times we fell into this ourselves as teachers, that the teacher or student will come and say, I want to learn Arabic. So we got out the Arabic book. By the end of the class, the student has their head in their hands. It's like, I don't want to come to your class anymore. It's too difficult. Because the teacher was giving, and sometimes we fell into this, the teacher's giving you things that are too complicated for you right now. So it's important that your teacher knows how to take you down that road. They've been down that road, and maybe they're not at the end of it. We're not going to say that they're necessarily, this great scholar, but they're somebody who knows how to take you to the next step. And they themselves should be suitable as an example. Shouldn't be a teacher who go to that teacher and that teacher themselves is in need of Islamic guidance. It happens. And I mean by that, the basics. The teacher themselves is missing the basics. So that's not right, that you're learning from a teacher who's teaching you something to benefit you, but subhanAllah, that teacher is missing the most fundamental things about Islam in themselves. So it has to be someone you can follow their example and follow their manners and follow their way of teaching, and they understand how to teach the book. And that really is the way of learning. And subhanAllah, sometimes the number of books you need are very small. We started putting together a plan and a map of the books that you need to do. And like we said, we're not saying these are the only books, because each region has some preferences, some books they teach instead of others, depending on madhab, depending on, even in Arabic grammar, you have different schools of thought, so there are some different books. But generally, as a rule, there is a steps that you follow. And they're the same things that people have followed for hundreds, if not, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. People have been following the same books, the same steps, the same, more or less, give or take. A couple of new additions here and there, but generally, people are following the same steps and the same way, and they're memorizing them. They're not just letting them go. Maybe not memorize word for word, depending on your ability. You might start by just memorizing the dalil, the ayat and the hadith and the chapter headings, and then later on you keep going. The sixth principle the Shaykh mentioned is taking into account the different sciences when acquiring knowledge and giving precedence to them in order of importance. Al-aham fal-muhim. The most important one comes first. Because we mentioned all these sciences, right? Tafsir, hadith, fiqh, usul, mustalah al-hadith, nahu, sarf, all these different sciences. Are they all the same? They're not all the same in importance, right? Somebody might say, Alhamdulillah, brother Tim, I took your advice, and I've studied, I don't know, something like balagha, eloquence in Arabic, and I've studied it for 10 years. I say, have you studied fiqh? I say, no, not yet. You studied tafsir? Not yet. Do you know any hadiths? Nothing. But 10 years I've studied how to be eloquent in speech. We say, mashallah, you studied something good, but you haven't quite got the priorities right, because the things that you really needed, you kind of left off, and the things that were kind of a bonus, you went really, really far in them. So he mentions for this Ibn al-Jawzi, rahimahullah ta'ala, in Sayyid al-Khatir, he said, gathering different types of knowledge is something praiseworthy, and then he quoted a poet who said, take from every science and do not be ignorant of it. For the free person is the one who looks into the secrets of the different sciences. He doesn't just become an expert in one thing. And this is a problem even in the way we study in places like Medina. They push you very quickly to take one thing and become expert in it. But in reality, what we need in the beginning is a foundation. And the foundation we need in knowledge is a little bit of each science. So it's not good that a person comes and says, like, these days we have this idea of, he is, for example, in a very early stage, we're not talking about someone who studied for many, many decades and years. Someone, he's only just began to study. He's just, the only thing he knows is mustalah al-hadith, the science of hadith, the narrators and the chains. But he doesn't understand the hadith, the fiqh of it, the implementation of it. He doesn't understand the tafsir of the Quran. He doesn't act upon it or implement it in his life. This is a problem. You become expert in one thing too early. In the beginning, take a little bit of everything, and as you get further and further on, you can start to become more specialized in something. For example, in Medina, we came to Medina, we didn't even know, 20 words of Arabic. And we stay there for 2 years, we learn a few Arabic words, and they say, what do you want to specialize in? That's the wrong, we understand they have limited time and resources, Jazakumullah khairah. But in terms of our personal study, that's the wrong way of going about it. That very, very early on, you become very specialized. No, in the beginning, you should be, in each science, you should be competent. And then later on, the Shaykh said, later on, what you're going to do is choose the sciences that agree with your nature and what you're capable of, and you start going into depth. But you don't go into depth till you've covered a basic set of texts in every single part of Islamic knowledge. Everything. Then you start going into depth in different sciences. And he mentioned some poetry that, wallahi, I personally, I love this poetry so much that I just want to quote it, because it's just so nice what he said. He mentioned a line of poetry about people who sometimes criticize things that they don't know about. Like you hear sometimes say, oh, he's just, you're busy learning what? You're busy learning hadith? Brother, you shouldn't waste your time with this. Like sometimes people criticize types of knowledge because they don't understand what the value of that knowledge is. He quoted some poetry, he said, أتاني أن سهلا ذم جهلا علوما ليس يعرفهن سهل علوما لو دراها ما قلاها ولكن الرضا بالجهل سهل. It's a beautiful line of poetry. He said, it came to me that Sahel, he was criticizing out of ignorance a science that Sahel didn't know. Sciences that if he knew them, he wouldn't have hated them. But it's easy to be content with ignorance. It's easy to be content with your own level of ignorance. But instead, if you really understood the value of all of these different sciences, you wouldn't look down on them and say, oh, it's only this, it's only that. You would really appreciate each one has great importance. And Imam Malik, he said about seeking knowledge, he said, beautiful and good, but look at what you will need to do from morning until evening and stick to it. Meaning that look at the things you're going to need tomorrow, those are your most important things. And try to learn those first, and then you keep your knowledge in order of importance. And the poet, he said, if you want to learn a science, complete it. And as for others, before you finish the first one, stop. Prohibition has come for learning multiple sciences at once, because if two twins try to leave the womb together, they'll never come out. So he said, you can't become an expert in lots of different things at once, unless you're a very rare person. Very rare. It's very rare that somebody becomes an expert in everything at once. Some people did. There are people in the history of Islam who did that. But it's very, very rare. Usually, you're going to get a basic foundation in everything. You're going to start specializing in one, and maybe another one, and maybe another one, according to your ability. Because generally, if two twins try to leave the womb together, they can't get out. One has to come out before the other one. And knowledge is like that. When you start going into depth in a particular type of knowledge, you have to go into depth in that knowledge first, and then another, and then another. But this is depth. This is not the foundation. The foundation is you get a little bit of everything. You get a little bit of everything. The seventh principle the Shaykh mentions is taking initiative to get knowledge and taking advantage of your childhood and your youth. It's not that you can't get knowledge when you're older. but that the older you get, the more commitments you have, and the harder it is to learn and to memorize. So there's no doubt that if we were to take our young children and put them on this path and really push them for it and really educate them, our children will be able to achieve, generally as a whole, more than the adults would be able to achieve, as a rule. That doesn't mean adults can't gain knowledge, because the Shaykh, he quoted several people who gained knowledge when they were older, or he quoted examples, or he quoted that many people had gained knowledge when they were older. However, generally, the older you get, the more commitments you have and the weaker your memory is, as a rule. So you want to take advantage of the time that you have, and that's relative. Even somebody who is, let's say, 20, 25, generally the commitments, the time they have, the ability to memorize is going to be easier for them. So take advantage of it. Take advantage of it. But if somebody said, right, I'm 80 years old or 85 years old and I want to learn hifz of the Quran, say to him, of course you can learn hifz of the Quran. Of course you can. There's no reason why you can't do that. However, you need to take advantage of, as much as possible, of your youth and childhood as much as possible. And Al-Hasan al-Basri, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, knowledge at a young age is like engraving on stone. There's no doubt about that. However, the Shaykh, he mentioned that the Sahaba, all of them, or most of the vast majority of them, learned knowledge when they were older. So don't feel that if you're older, as most of the people in this room are older than children, don't feel you can't learn it. The Sahaba all learned knowledge when they were older. But at the end of the day, if you are young and you have children, take advantage of what they have of their youth. Don't let it pass by with, or go and learn all your GCSEs and A levels and university and then seek Islamic knowledge. Because at the end of the day, if they sought that Islamic knowledge when they were, young children, it would be much, much easier for them to gain a lot more. For us adults, we have to work a lot harder to get that. And the Shaykh said, if you are an adult and you want to learn, then he quoted Al-Mawardi, who said in Adab al-Dunya wad-Din, that he said that it is the huge number of things which busy a person when they're older, and the distractions which overcome him, and the increase in commitments. So whoever is able to keep those away from himself will gain knowledge. Meaning, if you can keep those commitments away and you can push yourself, you can still gain knowledge no matter how old you are. But ideally, you want to take advantage of the young age as much as you possibly can. The 8th principle, the Shaykh, he said, being unhurried and leaving off rushing. Not rushing. Wallah, this is a principle that when I read it, it's like I'm reading, this is a book, when I translated it, I felt like I'm translating like a book of my own mistakes. Wallah, you sometimes with the Quran, how many of us, sometimes I don't know how many times I memorized the Quran again and again, meaning like finished again and again, because I forgot a part and then again. Actually, this is a sign of being hurried and rushing too much, because you want to finish it in a year or 2 years or 3 years, and actually you end up taking much longer, because you end up hurrying and rushing to like sometimes you see a book, someone says, right, in the masjid we're going to memorize, let's say Bulugh al-Maram, and this book, you see it's like 350 pages, and you're like, okay, every day I'm going to do a page. Instead of taking you a year to complete, 6 years, 10 years, you're still memorizing inside the first 100 pages. Whereas if someone were to take only a third of a page or 1 line or 2 lines and keep going, they might be able to finish far quicker than the person who's trying to take a big amount because he's just rushing. Shu'bah ibn al-Hajjaj al-Wasiti, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, I kept on coming back to Amr ibn Dinar, rahimahullah, 500 times. And I didn't hear anything more than 100 hadith from him. In every 5 sittings, I would learn 1 hadith. And Hamad ibn Abi Sulaiman said to a student of his, rahimahullah ta'ala, every day learn 3 matters and don't learn anything more than that. And he also, the Shaykh, warned against a principle, quoting the statement of Abdul Karim al-Rifa'i, rahimahullah, the food of the old is the poison of the young. Like, be careful from going into too many advanced things when you're still starting off, because what might happen is you went into things that for the big scholar, that's their food. But for you, it's your poison. Because for them, they can understand it and put it in its place. But for you, when you tried to go too far too quickly, what happened was you ended up poisoning yourself. Not because the knowledge you're reading is wrong. The knowledge is perfectly correct. But because you tried to go too early into something too advanced. It's the same in anything you see in sports. People doing amazing things. And if you try to copy them, you might break your leg. Right? What they're doing is not wrong. It's not what they're doing is wrong, but it's just that what they've had a long time to train, and for them, that's their exercise they do. You know, flipping around and running up things and jumping off things or whatever, that's what they can do. But when you try to copy them before you have the ability to do it, you end up hurting yourself. So the same thing goes here. So a person might try to get something, they might say, wow, you know, this person is learning how to refute philosophy, and I'm going to learn how to refute philosophy before he learned the basics. And he went into the books and he started studying, he started reading, and they're good books, but he just got himself really confused. And maybe at the end he might even decide that I don't want to be a Muslim, or I don't want to practice Islam anymore. What he did, he didn't read something wrong, but he just went too deep, too fast. The ninth principle the Shaykh mentioned is having patience in knowledge. Not only getting it, but also teaching it to people. And he quoted Yahya ibn Abi Kathir, who said, knowledge is not gained by resting the body. Nobody gained knowledge by resting. And that's the truth. Also, many of us would say, why did I not achieve that much knowledge? Why have I studied for 10 years, 15 years, and I didn't achieve that much knowledge? Maybe we wanted too much rest and we weren't willing enough to get the pain from it. We sit for even half an hour and we start rocking on both sides. And someone says, oh, my heart hurts, it's hard, the masjid is cold, and I'm tired, and a lot of things. But wallahi, if a person really wants knowledge, they've got to have the pain of it. And that's why Al-Asma'i, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, whoever can't bear the lowliness of learning for a time will have the lowliness of ignorance forever. And that's why some of the scholars said, whoever cannot bear the pain of learning will never taste the pleasure of knowledge. And also the patience in transmitting it to people. Because it's also not easy either. Like when you teach, you also have to have patience in the way that you teach and convey it to people. The Shaykh, he said, sitting to teach students requires patience, and helping them to understand requires patience. And the slips and the fall down, the times when things don't go right, it all requires patience. The 10th principle is sticking to the etiquettes of seeking knowledge. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he said in Madarij al-Salikin, the manners of a person are the sign of their ultimate happiness and success. And a lack of manners is a sign of wretchedness and destruction. The good of this world and the next have not been caused by anything quite like manners. And being denied these two things have not been caused by anything quite like a lack of manners. And he quoted, a person cannot rise to nobility without manners, even if he is one of noble ancestors and lineage. Without manners are some of the most important things. Yusuf ibn Hussein rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, through etiquettes, knowledge is understood. And a man, or we quote Malik ibn Anas rahimahullah ta'ala, said to a young man from Quraysh, oh my nephew, learn etiquette before you learn knowledge. Before you even learn any knowledge, learn manners and behavior. And Makhraj ibn Hussein said to Ibn Mubarak one day, we need a great deal of manners more than we need a great deal of knowledge. And that doesn't mean that they're saying don't learn knowledge, or that knowledge isn't important, but that we really need the manners to get the knowledge. The manners, without those manners, the proper manners and etiquettes, and that could be etiquettes with Allah, etiquettes with your teacher, etiquettes with your classmate, etiquettes in the masjid, a lot of different etiquettes. Without those, you won't be able to even get this knowledge. And Malik said, my mother used to put my turban on me and say, go to Rabi'a, meaning Rabi'a ibn Abdul Rahman, and learn his manners before you learn his knowledge. Al-Layth ibn Sa'd, rahimahullah ta'ala, came across a group of people of hadith, and he saw something which it seemed that he disliked. He said, what is this? You are in more need of a little manners than you need a lot of knowledge. The 11th principle, saving knowledge and protecting it from the things which take away from it. Like having bad conduct, not doing things the right way, The elder Ibn Taymiyyah, that is Ibn Taymiyyah, the grandfather, not Ibn Taymiyyah, who is Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, but the grandfather, the elder Ibn Taymiyyah, he said in Al-Muharrab, the good conduct is using that which beautifies a person and adorns him, and avoiding everything which spoils a person and blemishes or tarnishes him. Anything that takes away from a person, anything that spoils a person, that's going to spoil your knowledge. Could be anything. It could even be something that isn't, it may be haram in of itself, it may not be haram. Some of these things of good conduct or bad conduct are not even haram in of themselves. But it's just bad etiquette and bad manners and bad conduct with people. And that's going to stop that knowledge from reaching people. And subhanAllah, if I were to quote to you what some of the scholars said about poor conduct, you would be very, very surprised. To the point that even some of the scholars said that the person who's always up to date with what's going on in the world and always concerned with what's happening in here and there and the other, that is what busies the person and concerns them. This is an example of khawarib al-muru'ah, of bad conduct. Some of them would even say that a person who stretches out their legs is an example of bad conduct. SubhanAllah, like you can imagine how far the scholars went. Even though we don't, in our time it's not a big issue, but you see how the scholars took even small things, even the way a person sits, even the way a person looks, even the way a person behaves. They would take it to be very, very serious indeed. The 12th thing that the Shaykh mentioned is choosing the right companions for seeking knowledge. Because people are communal, right? You benefit from the people around you. If you have companions who are pushing you to learn, then this inshallah ta'ala will help you a great deal. And if you have companions that are kind of lazy and they don't want to sort of engage and they don't want to learn, then they're going to take you away from knowledge. And Ar-Raghib Al-Asfahani rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, the influence of a companion over his companion is not just by statements and actions, even by looking at your friend, you can be influenced by them. And he said, do not accompany the lazy one in his condition, for how many a pious man by the corruption of another became corrupt. The effect of the idle person on the resolute person is rapid, like a piece of blazing coal on the ashes gets extinguished. You can't accompany somebody who's, even when you're really dedicated, you only have to spend a short time with someone who isn't, and your fire gets put out. And Ibn Mas'ud rahimahullah ta'ala said, judge a person by the one he accompanies, for a man only accompanies one like him. And Ibn Mani' rahimahullah ta'ala said in Irshad al-Tullab, while advising the student of knowledge, he must be careful about mixing with fools, people of insolence, impertinent, those with bad reputations, the feeble-minded and the idle. For mixing with them is a reason for a person losing out and a person being wretched. And Sufyan ibn Uyayna rahimahullah ta'ala said, if I see a particular person in my gathering who is not a good person, I prevent my other students from hearing the hadith. I stop my other students from hearing the hadith. I don't tell them the hadith. If I see that in the gathering there is somebody who is not the right, has bad behavior or bad conduct. The 13th principle the Shaykh mentions is making an effort to memorize, to revise as a group, and to ask questions. 3 things. He said knowledge is based on these 3 things. Memorizing, which means memorizing and revising, going over it again and again. Number 2, revising as a group. That means you get your classmates and your friends together and you sit down and you start going over what you learnt in the class and you ask questions. And the way the Shaykh put it is really beautiful, because he said that each one of these has a connection. When you memorize, this is your private time with yourself. When you memorize, it's you and your hifz, you and your book. When you sit with your classmates and revise, this is you and your classmates, you and your colleagues, you and the people around you. And when you ask questions, this is you and the Shaykh. So you have, subhanAllah, all 3 different connections. One with yourself, one with the people around you, and one with your teacher. He mentioned a number of points like this, but I'll just mention one of them. which is what Al-Bukhari narrated, and the translation of which is that Abdullah ibn Yusuf narrated to me, said Malik informed us from Nafi, from Ibn Umar, radiallahu anhuma, that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, and the translation of the hadith is, the example of the one who has memorized the Quran is like the example of the owner of a hobbled camel. If he keeps an eye on it and remains vigilant, the camel's going to stay with him. But if he doesn't give attention to that camel is going to disappear. Ibn Abdul Bar said in At-Tamheed, rahimahullah, if the Quran, which has been made easy to memorize, is like the hobbled camel that if you don't give attention to it, it runs away, how about the rest of knowledge which has not been made easy to memorize? Allah made the Quran easy to memorize, and it's like a hobbled camel. It's like a camel that you've tied up. If you don't keep an eye on it, it's going to disappear. So how about the types of knowledge that haven't been made easy to memorize? They're even more likely to disappear. And Az-Zuhri, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said the thing which really causes knowledge to go is forgetfulness and stopping revising with your colleagues, and revising with the people around you, revising with your classmates. And he also said, knowledge is like a treasury, like a locked box. It is opened up by asking questions. So if you take these three things together, you get them. Memorizing and revising as a group and asking questions. The 14th principle is honoring and respecting the people of knowledge. Shu'bah ibn al-Hajjaj, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, I'm a slave, like a real slave. I'm a slave to everyone that I heard one hadith from. That's how they used to behave towards a person that he heard a hadith from. He would like that, I consider now that I'm a slave to that person. And some of them quoted from the Quran, وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِفَتَاهُ, when Musa said to his boy, the boy here was Yusha ibn Nun, rahimahullah ta'ala. Yusha was not the slave of Musa, alayhi salam. Yusha alayhi salam was not a slave of Musa. So why did Allah Azza wa Jal speak about Yusha as though he was the slave of Musa? وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِفَتَاهُ, when Musa said to his boy, like his boy servant, he was not his servant, but he was following him for knowledge. And when he followed him for knowledge, he became like a slave to him. And so Allah Azza wa Jal said, وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِفَتَاهُ, when Musa said to his boy. And Ibn Abbas took hold of the riding camel of Zayd ibn Thabit radiallahu anhuma, and Zayd said, do you take hold of my reins when you're the cousin of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam? How can you, who is from the family of the Prophet, how can you take the reins of my camel like a servant boy? He said, this is how we behave towards the scholars. And Ibn Hazm narrated ijma' on this issue. The Shaykh, he also mentioned what to do when your teacher makes a mistake, which is beneficial. So I just want to quote the 6 points that he said when your teacher makes a mistake. And we're not going to got too much left. He said, number one, you have to be sure that the Shaykh really made a mistake. Because a lot of times we spread rumors and we say things, but we didn't really check that it was actually said. Number two, you have to check that it's really wrong. Because sometimes the Shaykh might say something and that is a genuine opinion among the scholars, but you thought it was wrong and it might not actually be wrong. And he said, in this you have to go to the major scholars and you have to ask them. The third thing is you can't follow him if he made a mistake in that mistake. The fourth is you make an excuse for him. The fifth is you offer him advice in a gentle and private way. And the sixth is you preserve his status among the people and you don't take away from his honor in the hearts of the Muslims. The 15th principle the Shaykh mentions is referring the problematic aspects in knowledge, the times when you get stuck, giving it back to the people of knowledge. That you don't suffice yourself with, just your own understanding or trying to figure it out among yourselves. When you have a complicated issue, you go back to the Shaykh and you go back to the scholar and you ask them for these things. And the Shaykh mentioned there are two mistakes in this. One are people who they stopped asking the teachers and the scholars and they just went to their own opinion. And the second are people who asked, but they asked in a way where the question they don't really want the answer. So when they asked, they said, oh, the Shaykh doesn't really understand the situation we are in, and they just they just made an excuse not to take the answer. The 16th principle is to respect the gathering of knowledge and honor the people or honoring the books in which knowledge is kept. So Sahal ibn Abdullah rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, whoever wants to look at the gatherings of the prophets, let him look at the gatherings of the scholars. A man comes and says, oh so-and-so, what do you say about a man who took an oath against his wife with such and such words, and the scholar says his wife is divorced. Another man comes and says the same thing, and the man says the oath doesn't count with these words. And Sahal ibn Abdullah, he said, this is only for a prophet or a scholar. That only the prophets or the scholars did this. Where someone would come and say two people say the same thing, and to one of them they would say your wife is divorced, and the other one would say your wife is not divorced. This is only for the prophets and the scholars. And Malik bin Anas rahimahullah ta'ala, he said the gatherings of the scholars foster khushu' and tranquility and calmness. And when he wanted to narrate a hadith, he would make wudu, and Imam Malik, he would make wudu, sit on the front of his mat, comb his beard, sit calmly with dignity, and then he would narrate the hadith. The 17th principle is to defend knowledge and stop it from being attacked by refuting those people who go against the correct knowledge and who make mistakes. When those mistakes become clear that that's the way the person is, you have to speak out against it. But who is it who speaks out against it? The Shaykh, he said this is for the scholars, not for the regular people and the young students. Number 2, keeping away from the person there is consensus that person has gone away from the Sunnah. And number 3, the Shaykh mentioned rebuking the student who goes beyond the bounds or has a severe lack of manners. So he quoted some of the scholars in this. This is amazing. That Abdul Rahman ibn Mahdi, rahimahullah ta'ala, if someone would speak over him in the gathering or scratch his pen, he would just take his sandals, put them on, and he would leave. And even the Shaykh himself who wrote this book, Shaykh Salih Husayni, hafidhullah ta'ala, he did this more than once. That one time when the mobile phones were ringing in his gathering, too many of people's phones were ringing, so all he did when he heard the phones ringing, he just got up, he took his sandals, and he left. Go. Then he came back and he said, do you know why I left and prevented you from the class? He said, I heard too many people's mobile phone ringing, and I realized they were not respecting the gathering, they were not respecting the knowledge. So I took my sandals and I left. The 18th principle is to be careful when you're asking the scholars questions. Think about, why are you asking the question? Am I asking the question to gain knowledge or to make fun? Am I asking the question for the sake of benefiting, or am I asking the question to point out the mistake of somebody else? The second thing he said, to look at the question you're asking. Are you asking something of benefit? Or are you asking something that is an impossibility? Shaykh, what would happen if this happened? And what he's asking about, well, it's an impossible thing. Like someone came to Ahmad ibn Hanbal and said, oh Imam Ahmad, Ya'juj and Ma'juj, are they Muslim? He said, you're so proficient in knowledge that you reach the level that the only question you have is this. You don't have any question left except this question. Like that's how much knowledge you gained, that you wanted to ask this question. And number 3, making sure that you're asking the question at the right time and to the right person. So the suitability of the teacher. You're not asking the wrong question to the wrong teacher, or you're not asking the teacher when he's rushing or angry or he doesn't have time. And also forming the question with respect, in a good manner, making dua for the person, and so on and so forth, and not speaking to the teacher the way that you speak to the ordinary people. The 19th principle, having a passion for knowledge and it being the highest thing in your heart. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala said in Miftah Dar al-Sa'ada, whoever doesn't allow the pleasure of knowledge and his desire for it to overcome the pleasure of the body and the desire of the soul will never reach the level of knowledge. And that means giving your most effort, being truthful, and having correct intention and sincerity. And subhanAllah, there are some beautiful quotes in this. But I'll just quote for you Ibn al-Qayyim in Rawdatul Muhibbeen, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, as for those who are passionate about knowledge, it's greater than any infatuation or passion that any person has for anything. Shaykh, he continued, Shaykh Salih Hussein, he continued, he said, many of them could not be distracted by the most beautiful image of a person. He said, how can this passion be compared to the one who puts the pleasure of his wife before the pleasure of study? The one who prefers sitting with the people and chatting to sitting with the scholars. The one who is happy to travel to vast places of land but doesn't want to have the determination to transmit knowledge. The person who's ready to go hunting and do all of these activities but they're too lazy to fish for knowledge. He said there is nothing for these people, and how many they are, in terms of revering knowledge while their hearts are imprisoned with the love of something else. And the 20th and final principle is making good use of your time in seeking knowledge. Ibn al-Jawzi, rahimahullah ta'ala, said in Sayyid al-Khatir, it is befitting for a person to know the honor of his lifespan and the value of his time, so he doesn't waste even a moment of it without doing an act of worship, and he puts forward the best of speech and action. And in this, some of the things that are narrated from the scholars, for example, Abdul Baqi al-Bazzar, Muhammad ibn Abdul Baqi al-Bazzar, he said, I have not wasted even an hour of my time with any amusement or any play. And some of them used to state, as we said, 50 lessons a day, 13 lessons a day, 15 lessons a day. Some of them wrote 2,000 volumes in their own hands. Some of them read, when they were students, 20,000 books when they were students. Ibn al-Jawzi, rahimahullah ta'ala, was one of those people who read 20,000 volumes when he was a student and wrote somewhere in the region of 2,000 works with his own hand. And there are many, many, many beautiful things, and from the most beautiful things the Shaykh quoted is the poetry at the end. He said, time is the most precious of the things you guard, and it's the easiest of the things you can lose. This brings us to the conclusion of the class today. Of course, we didn't cover everything that was in the book, but we just wanted to give you like a taster of the book. And the principle at the beginning was what? The more you honor knowledge, the more you put knowledge up high, the more you give knowledge respect, the more knowledge you're going to get. And these are 20 ways in which you can honor knowledge and you can really give knowledge its due respect. And I'm just going to finish by quoting to you from Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, when he said, the one who seeks to go to Allah and the hereafter, or any knowledge or craft or position, and he wants to become a leader and he wants others to follow him, he needs to be brave and valiant. He needs to be someone who is in control of his ideas. He needs to be someone who's not following his whims and desires. He needs to abstain from everything except his objective. He needs to be passionate about the things that will bring him towards it. He needs to know the path that will lead him to it and the path that will cut him off from it. He needs to be bold in aspiration. He needs to be unagitated. No one blaming him or criticizing him can take him away from his goal. He needs to be a person of much tranquility, always thinking, not inclined to praise and not pained by criticism, fulfilling what is needed from everything which brings about aid, not worried about those people who oppose him. His badge is patience and his relief is that of exhaustion. He loves noble manners, guards his time, and doesn't mix with people except with caution, like the bird that takes a sneed from among them. He maintains himself in a state of hope and fear, wishing for the results of his choice to specialize beyond what anyone else can do. He doesn't use any of his senses pointlessly, and he doesn't let his mind wander through the different things in the universe. And the core of all of this is to leave what people usually do and to connect yourself and to break the connection with things that come between you and your objective. That is what Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala said about the people who want to really be something different to the others, and they really want to achieve knowledge that other people don't achieve. So when I translated this book, I found it to be beautiful, I found it to be amazing, inspirational, and I really benefited from it immensely. I was hoping to go through the whole book, but we went through it in Coventry, and it's on video, inshallah ta'ala. But even just to summarize it like that. And the aim is not maybe everybody to take everything, or maybe everybody to internalize everything in one go, but just for somebody to gain the idea that, look, if I really want to gain this knowledge, I can't just do it with half an hour here and half an hour there. I can't just do it by coming in late and sitting in the back of the masjid and putting my feet up and, lying on the radiator and being comfortable. I'm going to have to go and really dedicate myself to it. I'm going to have to work really, really hard to get it. And I'm going to have to try and emulate those people who got it before. Even if I can't be like them, but at least I can be somewhat similar to them. And even that would be a great success for a person. So inshallah, the book is translated. We're hoping to do some more corrections and fixing it, inshallah, and just put it online for people to benefit from, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. The book is called Ta'zeem al-Ilm, Revering Knowledge, by our Shaykh Salih ibn Abdullah Muhammad al-Usaymi, Hafidhullah ta'ala. And for those of you who speak Arabic, it's much better for you to go and take the Shaykh's own explanation. It's part of a program he has called Muhimmatul Ilm, in which he goes through about 14 books over about 8 days in Medina every single year. And you can get it from his own explanation there, which is far, far better than what we can summarize or what we can bring. But inshallah, for those people who have yet to learn, it's a bit of inspiration for them to really dedicate themselves. Because wallah, we can achieve a lot more. You know, subhanAllah, when I set out on this journey, and I'm still at the very beginning of the journey. When I set out on this journey, you know, subhanAllah, there wasn't so much in terms of, in Newcastle, in terms of people of knowledge, and there were, mashallah, some beautiful teachers who taught me and benefited from them, but Newcastle there wasn't so many. And now every time I come back, I see more people. I see more people of knowledge. We have this brother from here, this brother's come from here, this brother, mashallah, is Qari, this is Hafid, this brother is teaching the people, and I see that there's, mashallah, we are improving in Newcastle. We're getting more and more people of knowledge, not just 2 or 3 or 4 as maybe when we left, but now, subhanAllah, we're seeing, like, you know, tens and tens of teachers, of people of knowledge. But we have to take advantage of that, and we have to keep pushing and leapfrogging each other. So someone will come and study and be better than the person who came before them. And then someone else will come and study and will be better than them. And by this, inshallah, we develop the city, we develop the masjid, and we develop the knowledge of the people. And we remove ignorance, first of all, from our own selves. Because we're the first people who need to remove ignorance from ourselves. And then removing ignorance from other people, and then bringing the sunnah back to life, and likewise acting upon what we know and implementing it. And that's the biggest goal in terms of the knowledge that you seek. That's what Allah Azza wa Jal made it easy for me to mention, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to preserve and protect our Shaykh Salih al-Usaymi, and to reward him for this immense benefit that he put forward in this book, and all of the hard work that he put into it. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to put it in the mizan of his hasanat yawm al-qiyamah. And we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to teach us what will benefit us and benefit us with what he teaches us, and to increase us in knowledge and give us the ability to act upon it. That is what it was easy for me to mention, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Anyone has anything related to any question related to what I said, they're more than welcome to ask. General other questions we can leave a little bit till the end. We just see in case I said something somebody didn't understand, or somebody said like I didn't understand what you said there, or I didn't understand that principle or that point. So if anyone has something like that, they're welcome to ask. Okay, inshallah. Yes, what can I do?
Looking through part of the principles I mentioned, that we want to ask questions, we try to ask these questions to people that know. Sometimes it's a bit challenging to get through to them directly. And we try to ask people that are closer to us, who we know that they're not necessarily there or in that category. At least we have some kind of trust and safety in them. Is this okay, at least to listen or to take advice from what they have said?
So it's a beautiful question. It can be difficult for us in this country, and especially those that don't have access to Arabic, or even those who do have access to the Arabic language, but it can be difficult when you're far away from the scholars to reach out to them. But we have some students of knowledge, people of knowledge, who might not be scholars, but they are people we trust. Is it okay to take from them and to benefit from them? It is okay with some conditions. The first thing is the person who is asking and the person answering the question. Let's say somebody asks me a question. He has to know that I am not that big sheikh who is over there, like that big teacher. And I have to know the same when I answer him. So I have to know my own limits when I answer a question. I have to know what I don't know. I have to, that the scholars, they say there are 2 types of ignorance. There is simple ignorance and compound ignorance. Simple ignorance is where you don't know it. You say, brother, I don't know the answer. And compound ignorance is where you think you know the answer, but you don't actually know it. You're ignorant of being ignorant. And this is much worse. So you have to be careful as a person who's answering, that you know where your limits are, that you try, that if you go beyond your limits, you say that, look, I think we should take this question to the Shaykh. And one of the things that the Tullab al-Ilm, the students of knowledge, have a big job is to help to bring people's questions to the teachers and connect people to those teachers. It doesn't mean we need them 24 hours a day for every, minor thing, but at the end of the day, the more that we can connect people with them, the more people will aspire to be like them and study hard and want to be like them, and they'll get better quality answers than the answer that somebody else could give. So there's no harm in using those people, but like some of the people said, those people, they are like tayammum. They're fine when there is no water, but when the water comes, they don't benefit. So they're like tayammum, like this. I mean, they're okay when there's no water, but when the water is there, you can't use them. So a person should always try to get, and this is something the scholars of hadith taught us, which is talabu ulu al-isnad or ulu al-sanad. You keep trying to go higher in the chain. You know, like if, for example, I took this from the Shaykh's work. What about if there are some people here who could go and learn from the Shaykh directly? Wouldn't that be better, shorter? Because Muhammad Tim is taking it from the Shaykh. What about if you guys could go to the Shaykh? Like some of you would be able to go. Some of you could attend his classes. Some of you could make contact with him. So you would be able to go to him directly, and that would get you a shorter chain than if you were to go through me or to go through someone else. So you're always trying to get that short chain wherever you can, but sometimes you have to put up with the long chain when the short one is not there, right? And Allah knows best. Okay. Did you have another question?
If you don't
Yeah,
mind.
by all means, please.
Jazakallah khair.
Wa iyaakum. Allah bless.
Thank you for that. The other one is a practical question that some of us do for each other. How do we avoid some level of kind of decline, okay, to scholars? For example, you have a trust in a particular scholar, you know that yes, this is the scholar is there, is reached that level that you said he qualifies, but then it's not perfect. So, and you don't want to kind of just whatever he says, yes, that's the final. How do we? What level do we go to trust?
That's a really beautiful question. So the brother asked, Jazakallah khairan, he asked regarding the scholars. Sometimes when we have a scholar, we know this is a scholar, right? We're talking about one of the mashayikh, one of the scholars right now. And we know that scholar is not perfect. I mean, he's going to make mistakes at some point. How do we avoid this issue of, or where do we go with this issue of taqleed, and to what extent? The scholars, they say in summary, based on the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge if you don't know. That the etiquette is, first of all, you ask the question to the most knowledgeable person you have available to you. So that might not be the same person for each question, right? So it might be that I have a question about hadith, and this brother can answer me the best, and I have a question about maybe tafsir, and this brother can answer me the best, and I want to correct my Quran recitation, and maybe this brother can help me the best. So you ask the best person you have access to. When they give you the answer, and that person should be a person who's known for speaking from the Quran and the Sunnah, when they give you that answer, you can take that answer from them. However, when the Sunnah becomes clear to you, if it becomes clear to you that that answer went against the Quran and the Sunnah, then you have to go with what has become clear to you. And Shafi'i, rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned ijma' on this, that the one who, and the Shafi'i used the word istabanat lahu, and the sunnatun an Rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, sunnah from the Messenger of Allah became clear to him. He didn't become like, so he asked the Shaykh, and the Shaykh gave him an answer. He said, Jazakallah khair, you were the best person I had access to. I didn't have any more access. I took your answer, I acted upon it. But that's what I had at the time. I didn't have anything else. Later on I learned, and as I learned, I realized that the Shaykh made a mistake in this. So maybe I went like the Shaykh said, you go back to another scholar and say, Shaykh, I think you made a mistake in this, and you feel confident that the Sunnah has now become clear to you. When it becomes clear to you, like a Shafi'i said, it's not permissible for you to leave it for the statement of anyone, whoever they are. You can't leave it. Now you have to leave what your Shaykh told you. But in the beginning, if you're confident, you asked the best person you had knowledge, access to at that time, and he was the most qualified person, you asked him in the best way you could, you can implement what he says. But later on, as you study, it may become clear that he made a mistake, in which case you follow the 6 points the Shaykh mentioned. That number one, you checked it, is it really real what he said? Number two, is it really a mistake? By going to the well-grounded and the senior scholars and so on. And you follow that process until you become clear. It may not become clear to you. You may say, no, it's still not clear to me, so I'm still going to follow what the Shaykh told me because it's not clear. But when it becomes clear to you, the Shafi'i, rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned ijma', consensus, that you have to leave what that scholar said and you have to take what the Prophet ﷺ said or what became clear to you from the Sunnah. You can't take now what that teacher told you. That's the process you go through. So there are many times, like many masail, Suyuti, rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned that decades sometimes went by, he didn't have an opinion in a mas'ala. He said in a particular issue, and I don't remember how long he said, but decades went by, and tens of years went by, and he said, and I still was mutawaqqif in this issue. I didn't have an opinion about it. I still hadn't, it wasn't clear to me. Until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened me to understand it after many years, many tens of years have passed. So a person doesn't, in the beginning you ask, you do the best you can. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ, fear Allah as much as you can, but later on things become clear and you adjust yourself. And like Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala said, it's not black and white. You don't go from being I'm just paraphrasing what he said, not quoting it word for word, but you don't go from being somebody who is an ordinary Muslim to being a big scholar with a flick of a light switch, right? You go into a phase where you slowly start to understand a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. As you go through those phases, there are some things you've been told that you realize were a little bit wrong, and you get more clarity as you're going down that road until you reach the destination, and at that point you have your own opinions and your own decisions and your own ijtihad that you've made, but it's not like black and white like that. It's a phase of you start off with just completely relying on what your teacher tells you, and then slowly you have ikhtiyarat, you choose, like, I think this sheikh's opinion in this is better than this one, and then finally you reach the level of ijtihad. So it's not like a black and white thing, it's a phased thing, and that helps us to understand that it may not be in the beginning. In the beginning we may take everything that everybody tells us and we just do our best to implement it, but as we go we start to become a little bit better at picking out where the mistakes are, and the more we learn, the further we go down that road, inshallah. Allah knows best. We'll stop there, inshallah, so we don't take too much of the brother's time. If anyone wants to chat afterwards, we can have a talk, inshallah. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Wassalatu wassalamu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.
Just before we end, we'd like to thank the Shaykh for travelling and giving us this talk. May Allah count it as one of his good deeds in his Mawazin of Hasanat on the Day of Judgment. And he'll be returning back home, so we ask Allah to give him a safe journey. Just before we leave, brothers, there's chairs at the back. We just need a few volunteers to take them upstairs. So the more volunteers we get, the quicker.